crime against women. As you know, lots of research, good quality research, has come out of IMF, and Dr. Ratna Sahay is going to be with us today. Good quality research has come out of IMF, which has stressed that if women join the workforce in large numbers, we can improve the GDP of our country by 25%. While the country has been making efforts to have an all-round growth under financial inclusion, empowering women with finances and accounts, and ensuring that the workplace environment is conducive for work and good for growth. In recent years, female participation in IIMs has improved. Of course, if you take a long time period, their participation in educational institutions, including engineering courses, has also improved. So, keeping these things in mind, we noticed two very disturbing trends. In December 2012, we had Nirbhaya, which was very distressing. And unfortunately, in our country, we have had a very recent episode of another massive crime against a medical doctor, against a woman. These are very disturbing trends because these impact the workforce environment. And when we are making an effort to improve labor force participation of females, an accident or an incident like this is very distressing. And I would rather say takes you back a few years. How do we address this issue when the country is poised for an economic leap in growth? Very progressive, the fastest growing country in the world, and suddenly something like this happens. Then one is worried not only from the image that it creates, one is also worried about the efficiency of labor and productivity of the labor if females in the workforce are not safe and secure. As economic think tank, which has worked on contemporary economic issues, and we have done more than 220 webinars. In these webinars, we have regularly been looking at issues empowering women. Under the G20, we plan to do 11 webinars under a series on women. Now, of course, we were overwhelmed with other topics, and therefore this got relegated. We only did 6. But we have also been participating other than these 6 on women empowerment, female labor force participation. And again, on October 18, a month from now, we are again going to have another webinar dedicated to female labor force participation, which will be addressed by Dr. Sujit Bhalla, former EDIMF and former member of the Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council. Today, we are focused on economic implications of crime against women. To address this burning issue, we have the session chair, Professor Geeta Sen. I think she'll join soon. There was a little emergency and therefore she's yet not joined, but we are expecting she'll join soon. Professor Geeta Sen is Professor Emeritus at the Indian Institute of Management, Bangalore, former director of the Ramalingam Swamy Center on Equity and Social Determinants of Health at the Public Health Foundation of India, and on the Executive Committee of Development Alternatives with Women for a New Era, DAWN. Our key research areas are health and population, Gender and Development, and Inequality. She was the first chairperson of the World Bank's External Gender Consultative Group and was a member on the Millennium Project's Task Force on Gender Equality. She has worked extensively and globally well known with the United Nations in several capacities, including as the lead consultant for the United Nations Population Fund's India Population Assessment. Our first speaker for the day is Dr. Ratna Sahay, whom I know personally for a long time. She is an honorary professor at the National Council of Applied Economic Research and a non-resident fellow at the Center for Global Development in Washington, D.C. She is also serving on working groups of the G20 and the World Economic Forum and is a member of the External Advisory Panel on Gender at the International Monetary Fund. She has worked long years in the International Monetary Fund in Washington. She has worked in several regional departments, leading missions to its member countries. Prior to that, she was a deputy director in the Monetary and Capital Markets Department, where she led several policy papers and projects in the areas of monetary policy, exchange rate policy, capital account, financial development, financial inclusion, and gender. She has published widely in leading journals. She has taught at Delhi University and New York University. She holds a PhD in economics from New York University. She is also presenting a paper on domestic violence on December 13 under EGROW. Our speaker for the day is Professor Bijayalaxmi Nanda. Professor Nanda is currently the principal of Miranda House, University of Delhi, which during her tenure has been ranked first amongst all the colleges of the country under NIRF for 7 consecutive years and accredited by NAAC with grade A++. She is a professor of political science and gender expert who has been teaching political theory and gender studies. She has written extensively on gender issues, and her published works include 4 books and numerous articles, research papers in highly acclaimed national and international journals. She has assisted various state governments in drafting policy related to women and girl child. In addition, she has provided technical assistance on gender issues to UNFPA, UNDP, WHO, and UNIFEM, apart from scores of non-government organizations in India. She is a member of the National Task Force on Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao program. She received several prestigious awards, which are Teachers Excellence Award from the University of Delhi 2017, Pandit Deen Dayal Upadhyay Excellence Award 2019 for delivering excellence in the area of environment and society, and facilitation by the Ministry of External Affairs on the occasion of International Women's Day 2021. Our next speaker for the day is Professor Harpreet Kaur. She is the principal of Mata Sundari College of Women, University of Delhi, and was previously vice principal at Shri Guru Gobind Singh College of Commerce since 1990. She is a prolific author with 24 books, 9 book chapters, 25 national and international research papers, and numerous articles in journals like the Sikh Review and Studies in Sikhism and Comparative Religion. Her works include translations of the Punjabi booklet Bandar Singh Bahadur, Life and Martyrdom, and the English and Hindi booklet Bhai Kanhaiya, an apostle of selfless sacrifice and peace. She has recently done a very good book on Guru Nanak, where she covers his travels and historically very well researched and a rigorous book. Dr. Kaur has presented 17 papers at national and 11 at international conferences, including Stanford University and the World Punjabi Conference in Brampton, Canada, 2017. Her research contributions include 2 innovation projects and a major research project under UGC. She was honored for her research on Banda Singh Bahadur in 2015, a Sikh scholar of reputation in the Sikh community. With this, I think Professor Geeta Sen has yet not joined. Vivek, has Professor Geeta Sen joined? I don't see her here. Okay. So what I'll do, given that brief background that we had in our mind when we set this up, I think I'll go straight for the first speaker, Dr. Ratna Sahay. And I think each of the speakers can take 20 odd minutes. Then we'll have a dialogue amongst themselves. And if possible, then we'll open it to the audience. In the meantime, if Dr. Geeta Sen joins, she will give her own chairperson's address because she's so thorough and well versed in these issues. Let me go straight to Dr. Ratna Sahay now. Dr. Ratna Sahay.
Good afternoon,
Can't
Chairman.
hear you.
Can you hear me? Are you able to hear me?
Dr. Sahay, we
Yes.
can't hear you.
I'm able to hear.
You're able to hear? Okay.
I think
Okay.
people are saying that they can hear me.
Yeah,
We
now
can
I
hear you. We can hear you.
Yeah, we can hear you. Please.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. So first of all, thank you, Chairman, for inviting me to this panel. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here with you, Geeta, and Bijayalaxmi and Harpreet. Before I get into the issue of crimes against women in India, I'd like to make a general point. Gender biases or discriminations that lead to gender disparities have huge macroeconomic costs for any economy, not just India. The main drivers of gender disparities are multidimensional. Unequal access to education, health services, infrastructure, both physical and technological, and real and financial assets. The drivers also include unequal legal rights and their implementation, low representation of women in decision-making or leadership roles, and unequal distribution of unpaid care of children and the elderly, and the household work that all of us are so familiar with. And critically important in India, violence against women and cultural and social factors. So, what are the economic costs, or to put it more positively, the macroeconomic benefits of reducing gender disparities? Charan, I just want to make sure that you can still hear me. Okay. So it simply means that reducing gender disparities will help achieve higher economic growth, greater economic and financial resilience, and lower income inequality. In other words, when gender disparities are eliminated, it benefits everyone, not just women. As you rightly pointed out, there's now a large and growing literature on such benefits. Therefore, closing gender gaps is what the IMF calls macro-critical for improving macroeconomic performance of countries. So coming to our topic now, what are the facts on crimes against women in India? First, the rate of total crimes committed against women in India has more than tripled over the past decade, rising from nearly 20 incidents per 100,000 or 1 lakh population to over 65 per 100,000 or 1 lakh population. These data are from the latest National Crime Records Bureau report. While this significant increase in reported cases may reflect greater awareness of violence, and improvements in the legal framework and reporting infrastructure, such a steep rise could also point to a sharp decline in women's safety and well-being over the same period. It's also important to note that these figures are probably underreported, meaning the actual crime rate is most likely higher. Second, let's look at a narrower concept, but a very important one, the intimate partner violence in India, or what we commonly call domestic violence. So according to the most recent National Family Health Survey, about 1 in 3 women in India experienced physical, sexual, or emotional domestic violence. Over the previous 5-year period, this incidence decreased by only 1 percentage point. This marginal decline, very small, and its persistently high incidence should deeply concern everybody. I should add that domestic violence varies significantly across the states of India. While states like Goa, Himachal Pradesh, and Nagaland report the lowest rates at around 10 or 11%, there are states such as Karnataka, Bihar, and Manipur that experience much higher rates, with such incidences reaching about 40 to 50%. And since I was born and brought up in Bihar myself, these are really shocking facts even for me. So coming to the third part of my talk. So what are the economic costs of violence against women? So the alarming preference of crimes against women in India, including intimate partner violence, imposes a very heavy toll on individuals, on families, on societies, and the macroeconomy. Indeed, there is research that makes the case that eliminating gender-based violence may be one of the most powerful tools to advance countries' development. There are many channels through which violence against women translates into worse economic outcomes. There's the short-term and the long-term impact. So the short-term impact results from less hours worked and reduced productivity. In the longer term, growth suffers from lower human capital formation, which is obvious if women are negatively impacted. But it also hurts investment in physical capital because the government has limited resources, which now have to get diverted or spent on more pressing matters, such as increases in health and judicial services. Third, and very important, the psychological impact is immense on girls who experience violence themselves, or even on both boys and girls who witness this violence at home. In other words, the potential for hurting future generations and future growth and stability of societies is massive. The outcry and incessant demonstrations of the recent Nirbhaya case in Bengal is a case in point. Apart from the immediate loss of productive activity diverted to demonstrations, such incidences will certainly decrease further female labor force participation. In fact, a recent study at the IMF on sub-Saharan African countries by my co-authors at the IMF, by my colleagues, not my co-authors, found that a 1 percentage point increase in the share of women experiencing violence could reduce economic activity by up to 8%. This decline in economic activity was largely attributed to a sharp decrease in female employment. Now, let me highlight some additional insights on intimate partner violence in India, a topic I'm researching currently, and as you pointed out, I'll be presenting, thanks to your invitation, at the India International Center in December, with my colleagues at NCAR, Navya Srivastav and Monique Naviak at the IMF. In this paper, we look at the drivers of violence relating to individuals, their relationship with their partners, and the societal, cultural, institutional factors. And let me just say, we build our work on a vast body of literature that exists in India. So here is what we found at the individual level. First, both male and female education are strong deterrents of violence. Second, higher economic participation by women is associated with higher incidence of domestic violence. Yes, you heard that right. The more women participate in the economy, we find there is a higher incidence of domestic violence, especially when the woman is earning more than her partner. This is mind-boggling to me. Third, financial independence, and this is the good news, including by owning an account in financial institutions, reduces the incidence of violence, as does higher decision-making power within the household. Coming next to the societal, cultural, institutional factors, what we have found is that women living in states where there are more women in leadership positions, they face lower incidence of violence. Second, women in states with better rates of help seeking by the victims, possibly reflecting better reporting infrastructure and more progressive societies, face lower domestic violence. Let me expand on this point in the case of India. The proportion of women who seek help after experiencing physical or sexual violence in India is very low by any standards, any international standards. So based on the latest data we have, we find that less than 15% of victims sought help from unofficial sources, such as friends or family, and just about 1% sought assistance from official sources, such as police officers, doctors, lawyers, social services. In Manipur, for example, with a very high incidence at over 40%, only 3% of the victims sought help from any source, whether it was official or unofficial. In contrast, in states like Punjab and Goa, where such domestic violence rates are relatively low at around 10-13%, more than 30% of victims sought help. And this is encouraging, and there is something to be learned from these states. And third, the cultural acceptance of wife beating by both men and women at 37% on average nationally is really stark and shocking. The acceptance by just the women on average is even higher at more than 40%. And I find that even more alarming. Obviously, in states where wife beating is more acceptable, there is higher domestic violence. In Andhra Pradesh, as many as 80% of women surveyed justified wife beating for at least one reason. While in Tamil Nadu and Telangana, the figures were around 75%. In contrast, in Himachal Pradesh and Delhi, this share was below 15%. So now I come to my final point, and this is regarding policy implications. So in my introduction, I noted that the main drivers of gender disparities are multidimensional. If they are multidimensional, they also need to have solutions that are multi-pronged and sometimes have to be taken at the same time. And these have to be addressed by all stakeholders, not just the government. They include households, communities, schools, colleges, businesses, the corporate sector, think tanks, NGOs, the media, others. So what are the possible solutions? First, I really believe that charity has to begin at home, period. So what do I mean by that? And I think this point was best illustrated and best noted by Prime Minister Modi himself. And I'll never forget his speech when he gave the Independence Day speech on August 15th, 2014. It was in the context of the high incidence of rape and other violence against women. He promised to do what he could as the Prime Minister in terms of government policy. But he also said that the responsibility lies within each family. And I'm going to translate in English, so forgive my inaccuracies. But the essence is that he asked each parent, when your daughter leaves your home, do you ever ask her, where are you going? When will you be back? Who are you going with? What will you do? But when your son is going out, do you ever ask the same questions? By those words, he meant that the home environment and what the children observe and are taught are critical in ensuring that boys and girls are treated equally. It is equally unacceptable that the husband and his family should perpetuate the crime. And at the same time, it is also unacceptable that the parents of the girl victim or the woman victim and the society at large are unsupportive when such a crime occurs. Second, so first was charity beginning at home. Second, educating the masses and increasing awareness on violence against women must not only start at home, but continue through school, college, and working years. And this is a call out to the education system. There should be separate classes in schools and colleges, and continue through colleges, on raising awareness on gender, but more generally on diversity, which includes caste and religion. In workplaces, gender-biased training should be instituted for both men and women. Many companies around the globe do that, including when I worked at the IMF, which had an annual gender-biased training. And I also mean generally diversity training. Third, the government must ensure not only that the legal framework exists, the laws, but also the supportive frameworks, which are mechanisms to implement these laws, that the implementation should be effective. The World Bank's Women, Business and the Law 2024 report documents that on average, women enjoy just 64% of the legal protections that men do. In India, that number is even lower. It's about 60%. Fourth, the other stakeholders, such as NGOs, media, think tanks, academic communities, should absolutely continue to play their part. You know, I am so encouraged to see what is happening in India by the NGOs, the media, and the think tanks, and the academic communities. And I say this from my international experience, that these stakeholders, I find, are much more active in India than what I have seen in a majority part of the world. Yet I find it immensely puzzling how little has been achieved. And maybe my colleague panels will talk about that. Finally, and this is my last point, I do believe that cultures don't have to wait for centuries to change. Top leadership of countries, states, companies have the power to bring such change, and to bring such change very fast. Sometimes just by repeating their message in different occasions on women's rights and economic empowerment. I will end with the example of Saudi Arabia, where top leadership's signal to empower women resulted in many drastic changes, including the increase in the female labor force participation by more than 15% in less than 5 years. Thank you very much.
Dr. Ratna Sahay, thank you very much. You've given us an international perspective, as well as because you're doing so much of research, and I've seen your earlier research at the IMF. You've given us a very rich, our national coverage and cross intrastate comparison of what is happening in our own country. So that is very, very enriching for us. I like the statistics which you have given us because it's mind-boggling that 1% increase in crime against women can have an impact 8 times more on output. Because that is scary. On one hand, we said if we bring them more in the workforce, our GDP can go up by 25%. But here, a 1% increase in crime can multiply 8 times negativity. So that is really very, very worrisome for all of us. So, thanks a lot for your overarching, well-researched contribution. Let me move on to our next speaker for the day. Let me once again check if Professor Geeta Sen has joined. There was a little emergency that she mentioned to me. No, she has yet not joined. Okay, can I now invite our next speaker for the day, Professor Bijayalaxmi Nanda, to share her thoughts and guide us. She is the principal of a leading women's college on the campus in University of Delhi. Professor Nanda.
Thank you, Charan Singh ji. And it was really wonderful to hear from Ratna Sahay ji about all the issues and concerns coming from a global picture, and also listening to a study that they have conducted, which provides us an empirical evidence of crime against women and its impact on its economic implications. I am going to be engaging with looking at economic implications of crime against women, especially in the educational sector. This is a study that we have just begun. There's a group of us who are looking at it, and we are looking at the earlier frameworks, which is the liberal feminist framework, which spoke about the right to education and the right to employment being the ways in which women could be able to overcome the inequalities that exist. But moving beyond that, the notion, it is the second wave that you looked at violence against women and how that forms an obstacle. Even if women have moved into the public sphere, they have the right to education, they have the right to employment, the conditions of violence, whether it is in the public space or it is in the private spaces, how that impacts women, that was raised by the second wave feminists, of which I'm sure Ratna Sahay and others who are here may have already been a part of it. And in India, when you look at the Towards Equality report, which was on the status of women of India for the UN study, that was done in 1970s. That report also, the Towards Equality report, also indicated about violence against women, and the women's movement worked systematically on violence against women because they saw it as one of the greatest kind of obstacles in the path of women, even if, for example, in India, we got all our rights on a platter in that sense. If you look at our constitutional guarantees, the right to vote, the right to education, the right to employment, but violence and discrimination remain to be the obstacles. I would say that 1975 and now, and we should not be talking about this anymore. That should have been our approach, but we are still talking about it, and that is why it is important to make a point here. And I speak from my, from the conversation. This is a qualitative study based mainly on conversations with young people, and I am looking at what is the economic implications of crime against women in the educational sector. And I also want to, echo some words of Margaret Atwood when she says that men are afraid that people are going to laugh at them, and women are afraid that they may be killed. So this is a discrimination that has to be understood from that perspective also, how systematically a ritual of subjugation is created And when you move to the workforce in numbers, and you want to excel in the spheres that you exist in, whether it is the educational sphere or it is in the sphere of employment, these are the issues and concerns that we bring forth here, and we can shed light on it. And I bring to you voices of the young people. And just to begin with, there is this young person who I was talking to, and in talking to her, I asked her, what, when you move, she comes from a small city in India, from another part of not in Delhi, but a little further away. And she said, the first thing that my parents were worried that when I come here, I should have safe housing. So mobility is a concern. That's the first thing, that when you move to Delhi, you should have safe housing. Then the idea is that this is a women's college, so it's an enabling and safe space. The other thing is that we should keep the so-called, the elements, the so-called antisocial elements out of the campus. So we should have enough security around the campus. So this is just a narrative that I want to tell you. So I was wondering that while I was making all these arrangements as the head of the institution and somebody who taught feminist theory practice and gender studies for a long time, that all that we are doing here is segregating, which is also important, perhaps providing safe housing, providing secure boundaries, getting women to have enabling spaces. It's celebratory. But what is it that we need to do more? And I think Ratna Sahay's talk here about how educational institutions should get involved with gender sensitization, especially on the view of intersectionality, is important. But having said that, it's also a paradox. It's also a paradox. The first paradox that I want to bring to your notice is that women and girls have. Hello. I'm sorry. I think. There is some disturbance on the line. I'm sorry. Okay. So thank you.
Requesting everybody, please switch off your mics, please.
Yes.
So that doesn't disrupt the speaker. Yeah, please.
So when we are examining or we are looking at this issue of crime against women and educational institutions, and I'm speaking from here, one point that is the paradox that is to be noted is that in terms of educational attainment, in terms of enrollment, we have had huge improvements, huge strides in India. I'm not telling you the numbers, but I'm sure the numbers are all on the wall right now. But when you move from beyond that, even now, the economic survey has thrown a very positive picture about employment. Workforce participation has improved. It has gone up to 37%. So women are marching forward. What we need to examine is that the violence also is exacerbated. The violence also is increasing. Is this a backlash that we need to look at? Is it an engagement with men and boys that we need to examine? These are the two kind of boxes that I'm going to leave you with, in the sense that that's. So when we were looking at this study and when we were understanding it, one thing that comes to our notice, number one, women dropping out of educational institutions. And this is something that we used to study earlier with school dropouts, but at higher educational institutions, higher dropouts of women can take place, especially when these crimes create hostile environments, leading many women to abandon their education, thereby limiting their future economic potential. So you do see that, and it is going to come, and that is the aftermath, and that's something to be studied. The other point is that this is going to be long-term. Once they move out, and we do meet a number of people who have dropped out and now want to get back in, and that is another very, very difficult kind of a procedure, and especially scientists and others who want to be a part of it. The next is the psychological impact. And I think that's one study that we're trying. Our study is focusing on the psychological impact. And we realize the psychological trauma from crime, such as harassment or assault, is not just direct on the women's mental health. It could also be something that is perceived, or something that they are studying or they are reading, whether it is the case that happened in Kolkata or it is another rape and brutal murder that they are reading, that impacts women's mental health. If there is intimate partner violence within their homes, it impacts their mental health, and their academic performance is impacted by that. And this results in lower educational attainment. fewer career opportunities, diminished overall participation in the workforce. And this is creating a significant economic cost. And we are not understanding it, but that number will be up in the wall any point of time. The other point is that mobility is restricted, and that has an economic cost. And what is that economic cost? When this kind of a crime happens, women, when they want to access other spaces, for example, they want to go to coaching classes, or they want to move beyond that to taking up internships, they restrict their own mobility on their own. They feel unsafe traveling. And then from their schools and universities to any areas which is not, properly secured. And that is also evident in terms of, how that is going to contribute both at an individual and societal level. There are going to be very less women on the streets, or they're going to be able to access. And that's why I'm using Margaret Atwood here from her Handmaid's Tale, when you explore themes of restricted mobility and how societal structures will limit women's autonomy and freedom, and mirroring how crime does the same thing in real life. So, women are going to put boundaries. See, even if you allow them, and families are progressive now, and the Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao campaign, which I work on, has provided a certain value to the girl child. However, that is really, that is something that needs to be examined, that women will restrict themselves also. Even if they are living alone, they are worried about traveling. And that's something that needs to be examined. So I would say that crime against women has led to a rollback of gains that has come in through government policies, both in women's education and professional achievements. Women, there are many women in STEM education now, many women wanting to be scientists. Now it is our time to deliver. So crimes spark fear. They lead many women to reconsider pursuing. And this is why it's a qualitative survey that I'm doing, that it is not about the state or the institution. It is individually women will reconsider pursuing careers. They will think about, moving, and they would want to have segregated spaces more and more. Economically, I believe this results in a loss of talent, the skills, and women are, they are pushed out of certain professions, courses of study. The talent growth, the pool is hindered, and that is narrowed, and that hinders economic growth. Then we come to secure places. Now, if you want to ensure secure places for women with all its intersectionality, class, caste, gender, disability, there has to be real investment, both schools, institutions, public spaces, in security measures. I am sitting here and I am completely invested in this, but I'm still not able to provide as much as I would like to. So surveillance systems, safe transport options, trained personnel, that kind of that capacity building we need to really work on. And that cost of maintaining security systems, creating these women-only safe spaces, and yet implementing gender-sensitive policies has to be substantial. And these failures do result in long-term economic losses. And as fewer women will pursue higher educations or get into, so you open the army for women, you open everything for women, all the gains that we do, we are going to lose out. And that's important that we maintain better security systems and much more investment in that. Then you come to the public-private divide. And herein you will realize private institutions have more resources to invest in security infrastructure. Public institutions have to bridge that gap. And this will also create, at some point, inequities in access to safe education. And we need to work on that. Then in terms of, moving beyond that, there are indirect costs that we have to look at. And those indirect, I must say, mental and physical health issues, I must tell you, that amount of induced trauma. There are young people who are stalked, who are sexually harassed, moving to the college itself. There are men who are indecently exposing themselves. This crime-induced trauma can significantly diminish a woman's ability to perform anything effectively. These are chronic health problems, and mental health is a pandemic, and we need to work on that. And this is not just in India. I mean, the UN studies reports show that violence against women costs country up to 3.7% of their GDP in lost productivity and increased healthcare costs, 3.7% of their GDPs. In terms of healthcare costs, also that is something we need to look at, and we need to examine direct costs to health services. Reproductive health impact is also huge. Sexual violence leading to unwanted pregnancies, unsafe abortions, STIs, There's a lot of what is called intimate partner violence and first date rape, which also needs to be examined, where young people through social media, these apps, they are meeting strangers, and what is that? How is that increasing cost for women and public health? Looking at criminal justice expenses, another area that we need to look at. That is something that needs to be examined. Court, defense, prosecution, court proceedings related to crime against women, that's huge. And that the 5 studies that we had, 5 case studies of violence that we are studying, we realize that that's been one of the most difficult ones. Even if it seems we are going to get free legal aid, that cost is very, very high. Then we need shelters and crisis services, social welfare payments, and we need to work on that. Then there is also an intergenerational cost. There are young women now who have moved out and who are working, who are with us still as alumni, who are having intimate partner violence, and they witness violence or live in abusive environments, suffer long-term psychological and social consequences. This creates a cycle of poverty and crime. We don't realize it's a cycle of poverty and crime with economic consequences for future generations. So intergenerational costs must be kept into account. Educational impact. A young woman coming to study in the medical college is a role model. When she is raped and murdered, it has a cascading effect. And there is going to be a huge intergenerational kind of impact that we need to take into account. There's, of course, loss of human capital, underutilization of talent, skewed labor markets, cost to business, huge amount of absenteeism. That's going to happen because of this kind of violence that we need to take into account. Legal risks is also there. There are broader economic consequences. We see that with GDPs and gender development indexes or sustainable development goals. They are broader and we need to take into account. I must say this is not just for India, but for everyone. But the 5 studies that I have done, I have seen that in terms of education-specific impacts, there's going to be lower enrollment rates, poor academic performance, limited access to resources, because they will themselves restrict their mobility and access, like they won't go to the library, they will not be doing that. Stunted personal growth, self-esteem, aspirations, really stunted. Long-term consequences, perpetuated poverty. Limited education and economic opportunities will perpetuate. These are first-generation learners who are coming to educational institutions now. We must keep that in mind. And that is because of the supportive environment. Intergenerational trauma I have spoken about. How do we break the cycle? Ratna Sahay, ma'am has very well said, and in Miranda, our main focus is gender sensitization. Not just for girls and women, but also engaging with men and boys, looking at toxic masculinity. These are our concerns. So creating that is important. Comprehensive sexuality education, very important. Putting focus on support services, counseling, healthcare, and then looking at economic empowerment programs, more scholarships, more vocational trainings, and of course, looking at the policy reforms and enforcement. I am just going to end here by speaking about a young girl who had faced a lot of violence against herself, and from different, from intimate partner violence. She says that he has managed to move on, and I will always have to carry this burden. I want to really work towards uplifting and taking away that burden so that woman, that young girl can shine. So thank you so much for giving us this opportunity to bring their voices to you.
Thank you, Professor Nanda. That's very, very good. I think you brought a very good point. Now getting a child educated, and at least in the scientific courses and things like medicine, are going to get impacted. It's not the person who has been the victim. I think even reading such crime leaves an impact on not only the girl child, but on the parents and the society, and everybody suddenly then becomes very sensitive to send a child or not send a child. And I totally agree with you. This can have long-term implications, and perpetuated poverty and a cycle of poverty and crime sets in. I also like the fact that, yes, this toxic masculinity that you are referring to, one has to really address it. And I'm happy that in your college, you're doing it through sensitizing not only the girls, but even the men and others. Um, I'm also really worried about the point that you made of the security in and around the campus. I think that will have to now get enhanced uh, tremendously if we have to attract the girl child to educational institutions. So thank you for your observations. And let me move on to our last speaker for the day. Again, Professor Harpreet Kaur is the principal of Mata Sundari College for Women, another college in the University of Delhi. And she has been the vice principal earlier at Shri Guru Gobind Singh College of Commerce since 1990. So she has been in the leadership role now for nearly 30 years. So let's invite her and request her. Yeah, Professor Harpreet, if you could share your findings and guide us.
Thank you, Professor Charan Singh. And I really appreciate EGROW Foundation for this kind of activity, because such things have to be talked about. If we don't talk and don't discuss, I think we'll not end anywhere. Being principal of a women college, I have found such problems which we have never heard. I mean, earlier I had never heard, but in a girls' college, I've heard so many other problems, which I can see from the gendered perspective in the society. We all know this perspective is really pervasive, and in a normal course also we see that things are very vulnerable. It's very, things are desperate, and sometimes, the women are seeking for better life, but in emergencies and unnatural calamities, disasters, wars, human trafficking, the situation worsens. So, reflecting the same patriarchal nature of the society and also the patriarchal nature of the society all over the world, not only in India or South Asia and other countries, but I insist that it is all over the world, that we have to see, world from the gender lens, and which is very visible. And but the economic impact which we are talking about, and this topic is really very, very pertinent, because we talk about the cultural and social impact, but all these are interchangeable. They are affecting each other, and economic impact cannot be ignored, undermined, or neglected at any point. And so we are discussing this deeply ingrained problem, which seems to be very elusive till date. So if I define the problem, crime against women is a very, very deep-rooted issues, and reported cases are increasing. Now, this is also very, very peculiar, that cases which are being reported are increasing. Not to say that the things were not happening earlier, but people are becoming more aware of their rights. The women are becoming more conscious of their rights, and they are having the strength to speak out. And earlier they were supposed to be, quiet on this, but this kind of thing which they are coming out and reporting, I think it is a positive change, and this will bring about a change in the society, although very slow, and much desired, and we'll have to wait for some time, but this I see as a positive sign. And Professor Ratna Sahay has pointed out about the statistics of National Family Health Survey also, where we are seeing that most of the if the women are physically beaten or physically mistreated, they are by their in-laws or by their husbands or by the persons whom they know. And this age is also is not is a very factor, that this age for the crime against women is from the child, from an infant to maybe an old woman. So that so every part of the society, at every stage of society, women are facing this kind of crimes, and cutting across all the economic groups, all the situation, all the cultures, all the epochs, and all the societies. So it can be in form of maybe rape, which is so torturous, murder, eve teasing, dowry cases, dowry deaths, kidnapping, molestation, torture, outraging modesty, and so on. And as we have discussed, both the speakers have talked that it has got an impact on psychological impact is much more deeper than what we are seeing. So this is a major obstacle in achievement of equality. When we talk about equality amongst men and women, I think this is one of the major hindrances. This crime against women is one of the major hindrances, that overall development of the healthy society is not possible. recent incidents, Delhi, West Bengal, UP, and we have it almost every day. It's reported every day in the newspapers and the social media that crime against women is increasing also throughout India. And for developing countries like India, if we see it's a major obstacle to the attainment of equality and overall economic, social, and political and cultural development. And multiple negative impacts are there. If I, can say it is physical, human, social capital, whether it is directly or indirectly, it is impacting that. Of factors, socio-cultural factors are the patriarchal society, which perpetuates gender-based discrimination. All the cultural norms, for example, in India, we have these traditional cultural norms that women role is of a caregiver or a homemaker. So this limits the opportunities for their education, employment, and also personal growth. Lack of education and awareness. So when we are not educated, not aware of the rights and laws. And so this contributes to a culture of silence and tolerance towards the crime. And that is the worst crime, what I believe. Then stereotyping and stigma. This is another fact that women who are victims of crime also face this kind of stereotyping and stigma, which prevent them from seeking help. They are afraid to go out and seek help or report the incident. So, violence can result in physical, psychological, and social consequences, and even death. And this is also true for the sexualized violence. So, leading to issues like health issues, which is physical, mental, reproductive health. All these health parameters are affected adversely. Or the developmental issues. Violence can prevent women from participating in the development and planning programs. The government is coming up with so many programs. We have so many opportunities, but this kind of a violence will hamper a woman to come out and be a part and parcel. They will not go out and seek even jobs, or as a recipient of a social welfare program. They will just be stigmatized. And also the rights issues. If we talk about fundamental rights, we have that, I mean, fundamental rights are broken. So when we talk about women rights, it is of course the question of the larger human rights in society, and we cannot segregate, but we are forced to see everything from different angles. So then consequences of sexualized violence can include for infertility, those transmitted diseases, trauma, depression, anxiety, and panic attacks. And moreover, when you are not supposed to talk to anybody because it is coming from somewhere, someone who is very close to you, and the societal norms say that you should not talk about it, you are not able to express your emotions, and because it is not an acceptable norm. And in these cases, even the identity has to be changed because of various factors. So Nirbhaya, which we call Jyoti Singh, was changed to Nirbhaya only because of this, that you have to change the identity because it is distorted, it is discussed in a manner which is not acceptable. These women who have undergone this such kind of crimes, they express, they are forced to be quiet. Sometimes they are also blamed for provoking the violence. Now, this is the worst part, that they are responsible because they are wearing something, or they are moving in such a manner, they are conducting themselves in such a manner, which is really very traumatizing. Now, if we talk about physical pain and suffering these women undergo, is that emotional trauma and physical injuries, and they are forced to leave their jobs, or unable to do work because of the physical injuries, or long absence from the duty they have to take because of their physical conditions, or they are unable to focus on work, affecting their productivity. So, if this is a kind of a psychological trauma which they have to undergo. And also the post-traumatic stress disorders and depression. So these mental health struggles, which are going on the society, the victims of the crime, is really very painful. And society blaming the perpetrator rather than the victim, it is much more painful. Sometimes this victim blaming mentality is deeply rooted, mostly in the patriarchal norms also, because we prioritize the honor of a woman's family rather than a woman. So individual is not considered here. So individual has to keep quiet because of the societal and the patriarchal norms prevalent in the society. So this loss of autonomy and agency, the women makes the perpetrator, the victim, very powerless and very vulnerable. Diminished quality of life results, leading to maybe confinement and social isolation because they are shunned even by their families and their communities. And this culture of fear is there in the society and limiting the women's freedom to move, work, and live independently. So the economic implications which are really related to it, so the woman is victimized twice. It is not only that the woman is victimized because of the crime, but also because the entire life is changed, entire life around her is changed, and this victimizing twice is really it perpetuates that kind of victimization. Of course, we almost see negative association between victimization and labor market in the natural circumstances also, but in such circumstances, it worsens. On the demand side, the employers, recruiters, and co-workers may discriminate against the victims. Of course, they are stigmatized at the workplace. Then also the labor market discrimination is a situation where productive workers are treated unequally, and such women who are capable but they are suffering because of some reason. If they are stigmatized, then that is really a painful situation, because in case of crimes this will worsen and their productivity will be lost. Another thing is also the medical expenses which have to be borne by them, because ultimately, because the physical suffering has to be treated also, and so those medical expenses has to be borne by the family. If the family is not supporting, then how to bear that expense? That is really a big question mark is there. How many women do get proper medical treatment is another facet. And also the operating criminal justice system. This criminal justice system, we have a lot of laws in place, but when we talk about the implementation, we have seen a lot, some lax attitude is there. So gender norms can sometimes desensitize the public to the seriousness of crime. People choose to keep quiet. So economic impact has to be not overlooked, but it is very significant. And but in case of domestic violence, what I see is that women are often economically dependent on their abusers. So it is very difficult for them to escape abusive situations. This economic dependency is both cause and consequence of the social cultural subordination of women in India. So the crime extends beyond the individual to the family and community level as well. Families of the victim often face social ostracism and financial burdens if the woman is the primary breadwinner. Many times women are leading, and if such a woman who is a primary breadwinner, she is victimized, then a lot of problems will come for the family itself. So the broader community also is affected. So when we see that this is a kind of again reinforcement of the patriarchal values, and honor killings and female infanticides and dowry, and whether you are not getting property from the fathers or husbands and so on. So these things are actually impacting. Now we have seen a lot of legal reforms. The Protection of Women from Domestic Violence Act 2005, or Criminal Law Amendment Act 2013, following the Nirbhaya case. A lot of laws have come up, and the definition of law and the victim in these cases have broadened also by these laws. But the social and cultural barriers yet operate in the society, and they often prevent the women from reporting crimes. And sometimes they find the legal system is also unsupportive and biased. And Kolkata says we have seen some kind of a bias which is creeping in, and some kind of things which are happening, which is even the law is not so supportive that way. So we have to find a way where the law is actually supporting these victims without any distortion. Now, we also have seen family breakdown in such cases. The crime or the victim's family is broken. They are forced to leave their homes. They experience strained relationship with their families. Social unrest is also there. Sometimes communities come up, and in Calcutta case, we have seen that how the entire doctors community have come and of course to raise the voice there against such a thing. But again, the economic burden is the cost, including their medical expenses, lost productivity, and the social service. So it is essential to address the root cause of the crime, including the patriarchal attitudes, the cultural norms, and lack of education and awareness. And the benefits of development has to be passed to all, whether men or women. Now, if I see in India specifically, violence in India has economic implications on household because we are predominantly agriculture and traditional bound region. So when the women are participating, it is more they are participating in the labor actively, which is unpaid labor. And in this case, this kind, when the crime is there, then a loss of income results, loss of productivity. So then cost of social service will increase because these traumatized women have to approach some maybe governmental institution or some NGO and for social benefits, because if this family is not supported, have to approach them. Then this will also impact the child well-being, well-being of children. Their children, of course, would be at crossroads, and intergenerational. Ratna Sahi and even ma'am has talked about intergenerational social and psychological cost, which we really cannot measure. But the children are traumatized, and they will their upbringing will be such that they will always fear something which is something in the society. So we have to see that this economic abuse can also involve sabotaging a woman's access to money and work. So, and poverty in India is one of the major reasons that incidents of violence occur and reoccur, and they are unable to raise their voice even against that. So, girls who encounter violence, they are forced to leave their schools. Their skill development is not possible. Then these women are less likely to hold any position, whether it is leadership or any occupation or any entrepreneurial jobs. Now, if I see that that how Protection of Women from Domestic Violence Act Section 3 defines the economic abuse, because this definition has been enhanced by it as depriving the victim of all financial or economic resources to which they are legally entitled. Now, this definition of economic abuse also includes selling of personal belongings, any alienation of immovable or mobile assets valuable, or other property in which wrong woman has a stake. Now, this deprivation of money, economic resources, or dowry constitutes the domestic violence. Now, according to court in Srimati Sapna and Sri Praveen Ishwarbhai Patel, it is said that economic abuse is when a widow in a joint family who is entitled to financial resources is denied them. Financial abuse includes dominance over income, spending, ledgers, bills, and acquiring, controlling access to and use of things like transportation and technology. This type of abuse actually rarely happens itself by itself, but it constitutes a part of the other forms of abuse. If a woman is abused in other forms also, as a physical or mental abuse, this kind of abuse, which is a financial or economic abuse, will also happen. So, this abuse of this kind is meant to make one partner economically dependent or unstable and limiting their financial freedom, and also leaving an abuser without money. Anyone encountering this kind of abuse can be stuck in a relationship with the abuser because you have no way out, no financial freedom outside. You are unfit to oppose the abuser's control and in fear of further abuse. So, financial safety bears out actually physical security. Numerous women are left without nothing, with nothing, and there is no financial aid in any event, even for the basic things. So this economic abuse continues, and they need to begin afresh in their lives without any economic security. Maybe they'll end up in debt or bad credit, which affects their long-term stability. So such are our social issues. And I will also like to quote one Mumbai-based study which found that 23% of the women who are married reported economic abuses either by their husbands or another relative. So surprisingly, these women are employed. They are financially independent women also, but they are subjected to economic abuse. Then they have to sacrifice their jobs or for the familial values. They have prohibited from studying or working, and then they have to turn to options like legal remedies. And in lack of legal remedies or knowledge for law, they land up nowhere. And stigma is, of course, there. And in one more case, that Nandita Sarkar versus Tilak Sarkar, depriving a woman of her Sridhan or any financial or economic resources to which she is entitled would constitute domestic violence, according to the Calcutta High Court. So these are the major contributors. The major contributors to economic abuse is, of course, we know awareness is not there, and lack of education and so on. So we have to come out, the judges who are interpreting the laws, that they have to come out of their subjectivity and define in their interpretations in such a manner which assists the women financially also and morally also and in a supportive manner. And so this is all what is required in the society. A positive change is required. And also on the side of women, we have to sensitize that they should not be quiet, they should talk about it, and so on. Many times I have seen my students coming to me and talking about the problems that we talked about. Professor Bijayalaxmi talked about the security in and around the campus. Of course, in the campus they are safe, but outside campus there are a lot of problems. And so we have to understand. I report to the police also many times, see such a busy area, and yet we see as kind of activities which are really shameful. So in such things, how our students have to actually talk and be bold and face such problems. Because when I see that they are so innocent and they are so shocked with such kind of affairs, I really feel pained that such men are there who are so sick that they can disturb innocent girls who are studying in the college. But again, we have to make them bold. This is what we tell them. We say that you have to question and you have to put things right in the right perspective, and that is the way out. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Harpreet. Thank you very much. I really appreciate the fact that you brought in the economic abuse in a very big way, and that is another very troublesome weapon that can be used in weakening the women. So I thank three of you for bringing this issue up. And Professor Harpreet, the stigma factor is very, very strong. That can break the families. I totally agree with you. And then also not only break the families, I think it goes back to the intergenerational poverty and crime relationship. Because once you can't go for skilling, you can't go for education, and there's a stigma, I think, finished in that society. You move out. So again into that cycle. Well, three of you have spoken, and I want to thank you for it. There are a list of questions in the chat box. If you want to address any one of them, you're welcome to. If anyone has a question, and briefly, because we have about 10 minutes, you can raise your hand. I would like to give an opportunity to each one of you now to have any other observation now that you have heard each other. My question to all of you would be, all three of you are educated. The crime has taken place, the recent crime has taken place against an educated woman. While we say education is a great insurance and reduces crime against women, here it is something little puzzling. So how would you tackle this? And second thing is, all of you have said there are measures which can help. But do you think there are any individual measures that can be taken up so that this crime against women can be removed, or at least situations like the one which has precipitated this talk and the recent concern in the country could have been avoided. So would you have any ideas on that aspect so that women in the country instantly can adopt certain techniques, tools, equipment, or something which can make people alert and women safer? So I leave it to which order you want to go about. Dr. Ratna, do you want to start?
Thank you, Charan. Let me just pick up on the last point about what else women could do. And I think the time has come that the burden has to shift from the women and the girls to the society, definitely men. It is not the responsibility of the woman that she has to be careful all the time. The awareness, I would insist that the awareness training be more in the boys' colleges, boys' schools. You see, obviously the women also have to be made aware. And I really appreciated both, what Bijayalaxmi pointed out and Harpreet too. So the one point, which we hadn't mentioned and Harpreet did, which is, it's a fundamental right. It's not just a woman's right. It's in the UN Charter. It is recognized globally. So the only thing that I noticed is that, since the 1990s, when the first convention was held in Beijing and all the countries agreed on women's empowerment, the focus for many years, 30 years, has been on human rights aspect. And this is why I felt, especially working at the IMF, which does not focus on the women's right, but focuses on macroeconomics, that to get the men who are in decision-making powers to pay attention to this, we have to highlight the economic costs, because that's how heads will turn a little bit more. I'm not saying all men are alike, but I think because it affects everybody in some way or the other, we need to continue highlighting the economic cost. And then I was really amazed when I heard Bijayalaxmi's point about how it is impacting and reducing women's attendance and enrollment in higher education. Because the one, and I'll bring you an international perspective, the one equality that has been more or less achieved has been, especially on the primary, secondary school education around the world. Okay, that is the one that everybody talks about. And I was also very impressed when I heard about one particular survey, in STEM, where actually by now women were graduating at higher rates. So something like, 51%. But then not everybody was looking for a job. So when they were asked, why aren't you looking for a job? So people who joined the workforce were only like 20%, 23%. And they said, oh, we went through this education so that we can find good husbands and also be good mothers to our children, educated mothers. And this number again fell drastically to 15, 16% once they had children. So the society really has to step up, to break these cultural and social norms. So the main point I want to make is I'm so happy to see many men who have joined this webinar, because it is equally their responsibility. So let me stop there.
I
Yes.
appreciate what you said, Dr. Ratna. Totally agree. The society at large has to do something. For the remaining two, I would ask that reword my question. What can the society do immediately so that we do not have a recurrence of something that happened in Nirbhaya's case in the streets of the national capital. And that case was also a very educated young lady. And here again, there's a very educated young lady. So what can we all do? What can the society do? Of course, the remedies which have come up, better education, more surveillance, and changing the mindset of the men and women and the family. That of course, and this we had discussed even when Nirbhaya happened. Even I wrote a few articles that time, and the whole country was disturbed. And suddenly something very heinous has happened again. So, is there anything which we can think together as a policy step that we can do quick and fast that can at least mitigate such risks or halt such, as one of you mentioned, that this is becoming a daily occurrence in everyday newspaper we are reading this, and this is a menace which we are not been able to control. So is there something that comes to your mind that we can quickly address this, or this will take us another 10 years?
No, thank you. And listening to both my co-panelists and you, I feel there is hope. We have to suffer from that disease of hope, or we can suffer from having some hope here. But I feel I agree with both our panelists, Harpreet as well as Ratnaji, that we need to be examining this idea around gender-sensitive education and training and engaging. And I keep saying it time and again that we need to engage with men and boys where we promote the idea of healthy masculinity, if at all, otherwise foster an inclusive environment. How can we speak about that? Because every time I have realized that every time you speak on gender sensitization, there is a question about the men are the enemies, and that's so how do you promote also while you are sensitizing, promote an allyship? I feel that so many men are here and EGROW is doing this. It's very important that you have put this focus on productivity, on economic loss. So that's one way of making it a central argument. But how do you engage with men and boys? That could be one that you could bring up to a policy advocacy level. And I feel that that's an important one. Looking at male role models and ambassadors, involvement in caregiving and domestic work, if those things can be enhanced, can be spoken about more, and engaging and encouraging more open dialogue and reflection. So recently, when I went to a conference and I was speaking on Indian feminism, there were very many men and boys who attended that, because I make it a point to see to it that it was in Delhi University in the Department of Political Science. So the men said that they feel alienated with this discourse. They feel that this discourse about patriarchy is against them. So I felt there was a necessity to engage in this conversation again and again and find creative ways of fostering a more, how do I say, a kind of breaking harmful gender norms, yet at the same time looking at this conversation, looking at this dialogue, more open-ended, more reflective. Because see, if you frame the debate, who can ever stand for the kind of brutalization and violence that took place? It is not a man and woman issue. Very well said, Harpreet and Ratnaji. It's not a man-woman issue. It is a crime against humanity. And men and women should stand together on this. So I think this could be an opportune moment for us to take this debate forward, as we did with Nirbhaya, where citizens march forward, where citizen forums were made. So I think EGROW has actually very interestingly framed this particular panel, looking at cost to the loss. So I think this is a very interesting way of speaking on it. But if we could engage, that could be a very important step in the right direction, where we actually create. And this time what we are doing at Miranda House is we are calling all the gender forums, including the LGBTQIA groups, the queer collectives and other gender forums in other colleges, as well as the internal complaints committee of colleges to come together. So that will include both men, men, boys, and other genders, to come together under one platform to discuss violence, especially against women and girls. So I thought that could be one way to have this. So if you feel this is one area where we could come together, so more collaborative work, more dialogic kind of communities have to be created. I mean, just listening to all of you, I'm getting a sense of what I could do better. So I feel a more dialogic community we can create, and this could be the right time for it. My submission would be this.
I think this constructive actually input will come from the community-based kind of thing, a personal touch when you're talking to each other and in an open manner. That is very important. I think that is the one thing, but also preparedness among the girls is also another aspect to it. The girls should be prepared for such things and to counter such things. Maybe we have a helpline numbers, we have apps and all, so they should be prepared with such things. And I think Professor Charan was talking about that, that I think BEEP, which is coming out long back, I think 20 years back, you said that this is there in the other countries, that the women, if they are in danger, there is some kind of a BEEP and all, they carry with them this kind of thing. So if we have such things, and this is popularized, and women are made to they make it a part and parcel of such things, because so many students are traveling by metro and they are walking down or maybe coming through rickshaws, and as such sometimes where in the local community is really they are doing such things which is not human also. But for such things, I think the girls should be prepared to attack. Self-defense is another thing. So at least, when such attack is there, they have this kind of output. So preparedness is one thing. And preparedness, physical preparedness and other preparedness, which they can counter such things. That can also be one thing. And of course, the laws and have to play a major role. If the laws are very strict about it, and deterrent effect is there by the laws, I think that is going to play and I think a lot of impact on the things, and people will be afraid and they will not repeat such things. And laws is one thing, and also the media, how media portrays such things, that should be also beyond this, there should be no stigma against it, and the media should portray in such a manner that which doesn't look, I can't explain it that way, but the media portrayal is also one thing which sometimes distorts the entire situation, and the situation goes out of hand, which should not be there.
Yeah, I must mention, an accidental chairperson of this session today, Professor Geeta Sen, had to be here, and she would have probably brought much more richer chairpersonship dialogues than I can, because this is not my area of expertise. But now I just want to share a few things. Being brought up in India, coming from a family which has been very remote parts of the country, and relatives and all. So when I was studying in Sydney, I was surprised the women, young women there, because Sydney is also prone to some crime against women. And I was told, with especially the Indian students who were beginning to migrate to Sydney, that their women had pepper spray, they had the sound bombs. The beep would be so loud that in the surrounding immediately everybody would know that somebody is in trouble. That help. Also, a self-defense mechanism, so that if there is a wayward male around and somebody who's very stupid can be taken care of instantly, also before help become aware, or into the safe zone the young lady has moved to. Until we are able to sensitize the men in society that, look, there has to be gender equality, otherwise the whole country suffers. Is there any safety, given the situation that we are stuck in now, if there is any safety that a woman can adopt instantly? I am also aware of many such instances, some in my family and some in my friendship circle, where women, as I belong to a Sikh community, the women do carry kirpan, which is a small sharp-edged, you can call it a weapon, it's a kirpan, small sword. And I am aware of at least 6 cases where the woman was in trouble, and because she said, look, mind your business, I'm carrying a kirpan, and then the men just walked away and realized that this could become dangerous and troublesome. So the point I am trying to make is, while the society has to learn, obviously has to learn, the sensitivity has to increase. Can there be some self-defensive mechanisms that we can teach our young girls right away, instant in the next 30 days, 40 days, that these sort of instances to some extent can be minimized? Means it's a thought, I agree philosophically, we have to work much harder. Nirbhaya happened 12 years ago. We know that something like this has happened instantly. After 12 years gap, we had prepared, we all forgotten about it, and suddenly this has happened. I really don't have any answer or any solutions. I'm thinking aloud, more like a layman than an expert on the subject. Now, there is one hand which is raised, and and I know her. She's very well versed on these issues, very senior person. Other questions are in the chat box. I'm going to invite Maninder Sachdeva to ask her question, madam, little brief because we are running out of time. And then I'm going to request the panelists if they want to react to any of the questions in the chat box, welcome to do so. If not, I will then close. Yes, Maninder
Good evening,
Sachdeva ji, please.
everybody. I was glad to hear about one thing that was very positive, hope, HOPE, hope. We should not be so much negative, but whenever I pass through Mata Sundari, the police posts are always shut, closed, and abandoned. Yeah, there's a madam is Harpreet is my close friend, and she's right that this needs an attention. But we have got six, incidents like the Calcutta, and we ended up with candlelight marches. So another thing that came to me was sensitization. Yes, I'm a posh trainer, and I would love to start with Mata Sundari. And because yesterday I was at Haridwar at a multinational company, 80% of the staff are not aware of this act, posh act. Nobody knows about it. So let's start with sensitization and visit boys' colleges and girls' colleges with this posh sensitization. I think that will matter. Thank you.
Okay. So I'm requesting the three panelists, if you want to take any question in the chat box, welcome to do so. And if not, please let me know. I can close for the day. As I've already made an announcement, on October 18, we are doing female labor force participation webinar 90 minutes. And on December 13, we are doing a webinar with Dr. Ratna Sahay on domestic violence in India. So we, as a EGROW, we are pursuing this in a serious way. So I'll go in the reverse order. Madam Professor Harpreet, if you have something to take on the chat box or any last observation.
I think we should narrow down to prevention, prohibition, and redressal. I think these three things, if we do, which is there in the POSH Act, and Maninder Sachdev has very rightly pointed out that we must know, the women must know about their instruments available to them. And until unless they know about it, the details they know about it, they will not be able to question. So questioning is very important, but prevention is one thing. For prevention, we have already, Professor Charan Singh has also discussed that, how we women can prevent, and also prohibition. Prohibition is one thing that, these acts should not be repeated in the society. They should not be there. And at least in the workplace, such things should not happen. And redressal should be very fast. The law should react, and they should be, and there should be no subjectivity, and answer should come out very fast, and the justice should prevail in such circumstances. So if these measures are there in society, I think things will change, and hope, as Bijayalaxmi has very, very rightly pointed out, that we do have hope, and we are seeing a lot of improvement also. The girls are becoming bolder. They are coming out in economically independent also. And once they are economically independent, they are much bolder because they have exposure to a lot many things. They can deal multiple situations. And if situations are there as far as the domestic violence is concerned, I'm sure they will be bolder, and they can question things at home also, but that this is not the correct perspective. And if these things are questioned, I think intergenerational problems which are coming up, because if the children are brought up in such atmosphere where the domestic space is not a conducive place, then children will also be traumatized. So if they are able to question then naturally, our future generations would be much, much better. Thank you.
Yeah.
Professor Nanda.
Yes. So I was just reading the chat box and a couple of questions around, regional disparity in violence and looking at traditional, issues concerning conservative approaches towards women and the HEMA committee in government of Kerala. Now, my point here would be at this point of time for us to recognize that all the issues that we have discussed, whether it is implementation of the law or it is self-defense, these are all a multi-pronged approach, and we are already doing it. I think it's time that we need to examine, look at a new narrative on this. I think it's time that we also look at the different forms of violence that have emerged. Let's say cyber crime, the amount of pornography that is used, and how is that impacting toxic masculinity? The media, how are you going to examine that? So I think these are also areas that we need to look at. I mean, I'm all for self-defense of women, and I'm all for giving them the various kinds of methods of protecting themselves. But the violence is much larger, and it's not easy for her to be able to protect herself. So what is it that we need to look at? So we need to look at it look at media, look at cybercrime, look at the law enforcement agencies and work closely with them. My purpose right now is, can we do more work with the police? Like she just said, that the police, there's no personnel there at that gate. I mean, the police is doing its bit, I'm not saying that, but do we need to do more work with them? And also the cost of making security, providing security support, that cost has to be factored in, and that cannot be a peripheral discussion anymore. It's an emergency situation. It should be the central discussion. And the right to be born equal and be fair, be free, and dignity and rights, we all understand that. But how do you make this so central that you look at constitutional guarantees and my rights as a citizen to be able to study, to be able to work, to be able to move about freely? How do you engage with that? So I'm just saying, we have done some bit of the work that we have done has been around self-defense and other things. Can we now move on to another part and say that, well, let this become central, security of women and girls as central to institutions in terms of resource mobilization. Law enforcement agencies' central role, protect the women so that they have free mobility. Can that be central? I mean, that's my thing. And that's perhaps, responding, because a lot of them are writing that even after the report, the sexual harassment has increased, or the law courts are still dealing with the POSCO and the POSH Acts. So I feel we need to be examining these matters. And I'm just thinking aloud like you, and extremely with a sense of, also with a sense of concern, a sense of outrage and a sense of anguish, while being hopeful.
Dr. Ratna.
I'm just going to emphasize on one point, and I'm picking up really from what Professor Nanda said. So the key point I want to make is we need new approaches to the problem. And I'll highlight three. One that, as mentioned by Bijayalaxmi, there has to be a more collaborative approach, more dialogue with boys, men, girls, women. I think that is critical, so that it's not one against the other. It is, we are in it together. So that's the point number one. The second approach, and that is also in response to one of the questions in the chat box, and that relates very much to this question of what do we do? This is by Amrita Mishra. What do we do about the older generation? They are, very much perpetuating it, right? Because they're bound by traditions, etc. So in what I said, and many of my panelists said about education and training, and I tried to cover the whole gambit, but I really think we need to also go into societies and even educate the older generation. We have to do that, We have to find ways. Maybe the NGOs can do it. Maybe, there are town halls. So that is the second approach I think I really want to emphasize. And the final one, and this may be controversial, but one of you said, I think it was Harpreet, the point should not be about segregating the girls. That is not the solution. I think also Professor Nanda pointed that out. It's not about segregating. I mean, it's very natural to have all kinds of gender around you, and we should become more comfortable with each other. But of course, at this point, and I live in the US, and I see, the difference, because every time, I would take my daughter to India, she said, I'm in a jail. You don't let me out of the house by myself. And, and of course, I would also say, can you wear kind of less revealing clothes, right? And she would say, Mom, why is the onus on me? Why is the onus on the women? The guys have to behave themselves. So really the third point is, and I know it'll take a little while, but I don't think we should be pushing towards more segregation. It really should be more about resolving the problems of why we are needing to segregate them. So getting to the root cause. So let me stop there. Thank you. Thank you. And it was really a pleasure. Charan, I do want to congratulate you because you are doing a phenomenal amount. I'm so glad you're a man who's doing it. And it was really a pleasure to, discuss this with my panelists, Bijayalaxmi and Harpreet. Thank you. Thank you so much.
So I must mention two things. One is a multi-pronged approach would be necessary. While we need to sensitize the men and the boys, but in the Nirbhaya case, the boys who did it would have never come in the sensitivity zone where I could have gone around and spoken at schools, colleges, TV, media. These three men, and one of them was a young cleaner. I don't know how would have I reached them to tell them, look, there is something which is important. We have to take care of. We cannot just do this. On the other hand, I think medieval India, the traditional India, our historical knowledge is that we are a country where we have so many women goddesses whom we worship, for whom the men and women alike do fasting for days together. And how do we reach out to them? And I think religious institutions probably will have to play a role, educational institutions, NGOs. Multi-pronged means we really have to do a multi-pronged strategy to tell the world in our country, young boys and girls, educated, uneducated, illiterate, wherever they are, that they have a social responsibility in not doing such things. They have to be more sensitive. I think we have a long task on hand. I would also like to mention that this is really a challenge, and I would conclude by saying, Professor, the efforts of the Red out, just caution him you're doing. So the is on the parents. I think as a society, elderly parents or whatever, we all have to put our mind together. The last point I want to make is, I think now is the time when we will have to say, like you have CPF and Central Reserve Police guarding the airport saying it's a national asset. I think a time has come to tell that if we have to become a developed country, a Viksit Bharat, it'll be zero tolerance to crime against women. Because she's as much as an asset as is the factory or the airplane or the man in the street working or a male labor working on the lathe machine. She is as much an asset to us as is my son or my daughter is the same asset to me. I think that's sort of the strategy we will have to now build so that all national assets are protected and women are part of the national asset. So let me conclude here and thank each one of you for being with us. and touching on this, agreeing to speak on a super sensitive topic and giving us complete justice and your honest thoughts on this. Thank each one of you. On Friday, our traditional webinar day, we have an excellent presentation on Tamil Nadu. Actually, we are doing a comparison instead of going and looking what European countries do, what Americans, Australians, New Zealanders do in developing their country. EGROW is thinking of learning from a continent-sized India itself. States which are doing exceedingly well like Tamil Nadu, Telangana, Gujarat, Haryana, and states which are sliding down like Punjab. Are there lessons to be learned from each other? What not to do to slide down and what to do to go up? So on Friday, 2 days from today, we have a webinar on Tamil Nadu, the economy of Tamil Nadu, trying to understand what good mantras Tamil Nadu deployed to go up in the ranking of states. I would welcome you all. 4 to 5:30 is the time, and I'm sure you'll benefit from that discussion also. So once again, thanking the panelists, thanking the participants for being with us today and talking about this major issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.